Maddox and Dwight.
Hey,
It's good
Rich.
to be able to talk to you again. I appreciate you from being here.
Yeah,
Absolutely.
we're glad to be here.
Cool, very cool. So let me start off with giving the audience a brief introduction for you guys. That way they kind of get a feel for who you are and what the conversation is. Maddox, you're a master of connection and creativity and care. You're a retired stylist of over 40 years of experience, and you were the owner of Maddox Studio in Dallas. You built a reputation for over-the-top customer service, offering clients an intimate, distraction-free experience where their needs are fully heard and met. This has laid the groundwork for your current endeavors in leadership and community building. You're a champion for authenticity and vulnerability, a certified coach and co-host of the For the Love of Creatives podcast, which extends your gifts of deep listening and genuine connection into creating spaces where creatives can grow, collaborate, and thrive. You're dedicated to lifelong learning and personal growth, and you're constantly evolving, attending workshops on personal development, spirituality, education, ensuring that you better serve both your clients and the creative community. You're a passionate connector and community builder, and you're hosting a connections event or behind the scenes uh, or behind the podcast mic rather. Your mission is to uplift, empower, and create a sense of belonging for all those that you meet. And then Dwight, you are the co-founder for the Love of Creatives podcast and community. Through authentic coaching, you empower individuals and teams to harness the power of relationships, community, and social intelligence, guiding them towards personal and professional growth. You're an advocate for authentic connection, co-founding for the Love of Creatives. You create immersive experiences that celebrate connection and belonging, reflecting your commitment to building vibrant communities where everyone feels welcomed and empowered, which is amazing. And I kind of fell in love with your guys' mission instantly when Maddox reached out to me to do your podcast, because that allowed me to kind of just go and immediately do a little bit of research, find out what it was all about. And I thought it was very powerful. I think it's going to be very powerful. I think it's going to be very moving within the creative community. Um, and so I appreciate you guys for that. Appreciate you guys for
Thank
that.
you.
That means a lot. Thank you very much.
So I want to just start off with my, like I said, my only scripted question, and this will be the same question to each of you. So whoever goes first is the one who gets put on the hot plate, and the other one gets to prepare mentally. So I'm going to start off with Dwight.
Yeah.
That first question is, where were you born, and what was life like as a kid for Dwight?
Oh my goodness. Well, I was born not too far from where we are now, in Parkland Hospital, and that's in Dallas. I spent my early childhood in the mid cities, so right between Dallas and Fort Worth. I spent most of my time in the little areas between the two skylines. That's how I was able to find my way and to always know where I was with my mental map, because in uh, in North Texas we don't really have topography. We just have the skyline of Dallas and the skyline of Fort Worth. And I remember having some of the typical suburban childhood memories of a child of the 80s.
Okay.
I'll say it's anyone that has enjoyed Stranger Things or watched E.T. probably has a pretty good idea of what my childhood was like.
Nice. Nice. So was that Was that something in terms of like school and all that? Did you have like your small little clique that
Oh,
you were grouped up with, or were you kind of the
oh my
leader?
goodness. Yeah, well, mentioning that, I'd say those aspects of my life were kind of a carve out for me. I was in a position where my parents were really keen on making sure that I had every chance that I possibly could.
Nice.
And for my dad, that meant that by day he would work in a plant at Frito-Lay, and in his off hours he ran his own cleaning service,
Okay.
and he leveraged that to get me in the door in some private schools. I'm not exactly sure if there was an arrangement where he could trade his services for tuition, but that made it so early on I was sent to private schools for all of my primary education, and in most cases, I was the only black face in the crowd, and
Okay.
it made for an interesting way of moving about the world because when I went to school, I was in some ways set apart because I obviously looked different. And outside of school, I had the experience of being also othered because there were a lot of things that when I would go to visit my grandmother in East Texas, there was the expectation that I would present in a certain way that had been modeled that I had no basis for being able to understand.
Hmm.
And I remember some of my earliest memories in East Texas were feeling just really hurt and othered in ways that I had never experienced. Like it was a profound experience, seeing what it was like to just be in a place where I could tell that people um, spoke a little differently, they behaved a little differently, and they were just oriented different.
Hmm.
I'd say there's a definite cultural melting pot within the great state of Texas, and I'd say if you ever have the pleasure of watching the bizarre comedy based on true events called Bernie, featuring Jack Black, they do a great job of carving up the state and explaining that there are particular regional differences.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
I came right up against that, uh, being someone that was from the burbs of Dallas going into the piney woods of East Texas. There was just a lot of weird cultural friction. Um, in East Texas, I did not fit in any space because I just wasn't black enough for all of the black kids that I would encounter, and there the mood was definitely one of still being uh, a lot of sunset towns in East Texas,
Okay.
and so I knew to be very fearful and careful around any of the white folks that I would encounter as well. So it was an interesting childhood to say the least.
Gotcha. Gotcha. And Maddox, same question. Where were you born, and what was life like as a kid for you?
I was born in San Antonio, Texas, and we only lived there for 5 years after I was born. So my childhood, my growing up years really didn't take place in San Antonio. I don't even have that much memory about it. I've lived in Texas all my life. I would say that I had probably an exceptional home life as a child. I
Okay.
had two parents that loved me very much, did the best they could to raise me. My dad could be critical at times, but and I used to think I had it bad until I really got out in the world and started listening to other people's growing up and childhood stories and realized that, I was somewhere right up there with Leave It to Beaver. I had a pretty ideal home life as a child. Most of my, well, I would say the things that marked me as a child happened outside of the home. My parents were very supportive, and I didn't really start to have problems until I maybe reached middle school, what we called junior high back then.
Yeah.
I was a very effeminate little boy.
Okay.
And I'm old enough that back in that time we didn't, the word homosexual was not used. The word gay was not even created yet, as far as I know.
Yeah.
And so, I was deemed the sissy. And it was a form of othering. I think that I experienced othering, which I've never used that language until I met him and got exposed to that language. But there was definitely othering going on. But I don't identify that much with that because it was so overshadowed with bullying.
Mm.
Yeah.
All through middle school and high school and even college, I experienced pretty intense bullying, very intense bullying. And it's taken me pretty much my lifetime to, there's still remnants of that, but I think that I finally did get to the other side of it, but
Right.
it left quite a mark on me, and my life has been really devoted to the personal growth work to, overcome those things that set us up, with all kinds of weird beliefs about ourselves and about the world and about people. Um, I would say in the last few years, I've been in a very good place. I don't ever experience bullying. There was a point where I learned how to set boundaries and take a stand for myself, and
Good. Good.
um, that was a very big milestone.
Sure. Sure.
Very big milestone in my life. Came somewhere in my mid 30s. So it's been a long time now. Um, but once again, even still, when I compare the things that I've been through to so many stories that I hear, I have known so many people, male and female, that have been abused as children, and I didn't have that.
Yeah.
And so, my parents were strict and had some discipline, but it was never, ever abuse. It was good parenting.
Right.
So I feel really, really blessed in many ways. I think there was a point a few years ago where I had this awareness that it was time for me to be grateful for everything that I had experienced, the good, the bad, and the ugly, even all the bullying, to
Yeah.
feel a sense of gratitude for it. I would never wish it on my biggest enemy. I would never want to relive it. But I look now and realize that that played a really, really big role in who I am today. It
Yeah.
literally forged me into the man I am today. And I like the man that I am today very, very much. I
Yeah.
like who I am. And I perhaps wouldn't be that man if I hadn't gone through those experiences. It's come full circle. I think there's something really magical when you can get to the point where you actually feel gratitude for even the hardest things that you had to go through. And I am at that place and
Nice. Very
grateful for
nice.
that.
Yeah. Did both of your parents work when you were young?
When I was young, no, my mother was mostly in the home. By the time I turned 11, my dad opened a business of his own instead of being an employee. And my mom took on the bookkeeping for the business.
Okay.
But she was still able to do all that in the home. There was a little desk sit over in the side of the den where she would sit and do all of the paperwork and bookkeeping for the business while I was still young enough to be there in the room and watching TV. So there was a point later, but I don't remember how much later that was. It may have been even after I left the home and was grown that she had an office in the business. But
Gotcha.
most of my life, she was present, and we were exceptionally close. They're
Okay.
both deceased now. I lost my mom in 2003, and I lost my dad in 2012.
Mm.
And my mom was my best friend most of my life. Like
Okay.
literally could talk to her about anything. And the biggest gift she gave me was unconditional love.
No.
Yeah.
She gave me unconditional love.
Hmm.
And it didn't matter who I was or what I did. My mom showed up with love and support. And I know a lot of people that can't say that. So I feel like really, really blessed in that regard.
Yeah. Yeah.
I
Absolutely.
miss her. I miss her all the time.
Yeah. We know you do. We know you do. Um, you had mentioned, um, I believe it was either in one of your other podcasts or with the podcast that I did with you guys, um, that your dad had made you toys as a kid.
Yes. Yes,
Can you speak a little bit about that?
that was my first exposure to creativity. You know, I was pretty little when he made this thing that flew. It was very interesting because I don't know how he knew how to do all this stuff. He was very creative. We weren't terribly affluent at that time in history.
Okay.
And so there was an abundance of money for him to buy toys for me. So he made toys for me. He took like it was may have been a pencil for all I know. It was a stick. And he used a large spool of thread. He removed all the thread. And then he took a coffee can lid, no, a gallon coffee can lid, and he cut into it and twisted it to make blades, made it look like a propeller.
Okay.
Drilled a hole in the center,
Yeah. Yeah.
and then he glued it to that thread spool.
Yes.
And then he would put it on that stick and wrap string around it and pull that string, and it would spin really fast and it would fly up into the air. And all the kids in the neighborhood would gather around. It was quite a spectacle, and we were young, and that was a big deal. You know, all it did was just fly up in the air and then fly down,
How fun.
and it was just this big deal. And then he would, as I got older, he made it for the grandkids, my brother's children, until one day he made it for one of the grandkids, and the grandkid ripped that string off, and that thing flew off and hit him in the face right here, and the tin can lid cut him across the face.
Oh, wow.
And that was the last time he made that toy. You know, he had never realized how potentially dangerous that was because
Sure.
it was a tin can lid with those rough edges.
Yeah.
He took two by twos and two by fours and made me a set of stilts
Oh, cool.
that lifted me probably maybe only 18 inches off of the ground. So they weren't real high.
Yeah.
But I would get on those stilts and I would walk all over the neighborhood on those stilts. And none of the other kids had stilts. You know, they may have even had bought toys, but nobody had handmade stilts.
Right.
So, you know, as a kid, you don't necessarily appreciate that. It's kind of like, you know, Dolly Parton's coat of many colors. As a child, you don't really appreciate those handmade things or the things that were made with love. We want that shiny stuff like we see at the store. But as an adult, I look back on the things. At one point, he made a go-kart for me that he used repurposed things. The back wheels were lawnmower wheels. The front wheels were a skateboard where he took the wheels and turned them sideways
Mm,
and then put a string on either end of the skateboard, and it was the steering mechanism.
right.
And every kid in the neighborhood rode on that go-kart. It was the most fun thing. Even my grandmother got in that go-kart and came firing out of the garage and down a steep driveway and tried to make a bend to turn on the sidewalk. And she was a chunky monkey, and it flipped and rolled her out onto the grass. Of course,
Ouch.
freaked us all out. She was fine. She got up laughing, but it was, you know, he was always doing something like that, making
Nice.
me something.
Inventive he was.
He was inventive, and I think, like I say, that was my first inkling of creativity.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I've been creative my whole life in some shape, form, or fashion. I've dabbled with art. I've done years of photography. Um, I was always the one to decorate the house for Christmas every year. My mom would say, "Oh my God, how's it that you take the same tired decorations every year and make something fresh?"
Mm.
She and I would get in the kitchen and bake all the Christmas goodies. So I got really pretty crafty in the kitchen. Um, and even now, still, I will, instead of just follow a recipe, I will pick a recipe and then I'll get really creative with that recipe and make it my own by altering all kinds of stuff in it and adding and subtracting stuff until I have something that's unique in mine.
Mm.
Yeah, yeah, definitely, definitely. Dwight, what um what was your mom's role in your childhood? Did she work or was she a stay at home as well?
Well, both my parents worked, and early on, my parents actually split. They had a divorce when I was in grade school, and they did their best to remain friendly, at least in my presence,
Okay,
and they did their best to make it work. It was as awkward as those things are, and um, both of my parents had pretty full plates.
okay,
I was definitely a latchkey kid, and I found myself on my own quite a bit, and spending most of my my early childhood. I grew up as an only child. I have two younger siblings, but they are much younger,
okay.
and so it's interesting because my two sisters are kind of like the other set of kids. Um, my mother was, um, I would say that we were incredibly close, but I felt like she just didn't have a lot in the tank.
Gotcha.
Whenever I would see her, she was exhausted from just long days, and she was doing the best that she could. I know at one point she had gone back to school, so she was going to school and working and being a single parent and just doing her best to make it all work. And there was a point where, so I guess another unique twist as is in high school, my parents actually got back together.
Hmm, that is a unique twist.
Yeah.
Yeah, like years later.
Right.
Believe me, I'm really curious. So is he, because neither of us know exactly how or why that happened, but we're really curious.
Right, right.
Right. But I mean,
So,
and they're still together to this day. I mean, they're
oh wow.
yeah.
Wow. Holy that yeah, that is wild. That's a story in and of itself.
Okay, you want another little twist
Go
on it?
ahead, yes.
His mother and I are exactly the same age, and his dad is 2 years older than I am.
Yeah.
Is that right?
Yeah.
Yeah. So we're from different generations. You're Gen X, right?
Yeah.
He's Gen X, and I'm a boomer.
Right.
Okay. Okay. But here's the beautiful thing of it, right? Your souls have come together again at the right time.
Yeah.
Yes.
Oh, well, we've actually talked about this because there's it's interesting because he's been in Dallas for around what, 35
5
years.
years.
Yeah.
Well, and I've, aside from an enlistment that I did from 98 to 2002, I've always more or less been in this area.
Okay.
And at any given point, had we come together, it just wouldn't have worked
Hmm.
until we actually met.
Probably wouldn't have worked for either one of us. In fact, sometime after we met, I said, if we had met a week earlier than we did, it wouldn't have worked. It was like there was just some pivotal changes in my life a week before we met.
Yeah.
Um, yeah, we joke all about it. Something like I love to make puns and fun and stuff, and
Yeah.
and I was thinking about saying, well, there's not that really big a difference between us because his mom was only 7 when he was born, but
Oh, that's
That would
hilarious.
not be true.
Right,
No.
right. That's hilarious. That's
There was
hilarious.
there's definitely kind of a strange dynamic because my parents were really young,
Hmm.
and I haven't really spoken to them about this because anytime in the past when I've tried to bring it up, they very quickly want to sidestep it or move on to something else. They tell me it's in the past, don't worry about it. But my parents were kids,
Okay.
and as a small child growing up, one of my earliest memories, and this is really painful, was I remember just using the language that I had, telling them that it really didn't feel good when people would make fun of me,
Mm.
whether it was the kids at school or whatever.
Yeah, but you were specifically talking about them making
I
fun of
I
you.
was talking about them,
Oh, wow.
and their response was engaging in exactly the thing that I was telling them, this is what hurts. Please don't do that. And they just doubled down, and it was just not a great memory to hold on to.
They didn't have enough maturity to even navigate parenthood. Yeah.
Wow. Wow. Mm.
So I don't know if they ever really got it, to be real honest. I don't know if they ever got the maturity to deal with parenthood in my eyes. You know,
Well, you
they're
know, both of my sisters are doing well by a lot of measures, but I know that we all share the wounds of what it was to grow up in that household.
Sure. Sure. I can imagine. I can imagine. I can kind of relate to the scenario of you saying that you felt like an only child.
Hmm.
Um, I have an older sister she's a half sister. But I've never thought of her that way. She's 7 years older than me,
Gotcha.
and she never lived with me.
Hmm.
She always lived in Tennessee with her mom. My dad came up here to Michigan when he was 16 or 17, I think. He ended up staying with his sister because her husband was in the military and they were stationed here at the Air National Guard base. So he came up here, stayed with them, and worked as a mechanic. And then eventually went back to Tennessee, met my mom, and then moved her up here. And about 2 years after they got married and moved up here, they had me. And then 9 years later, they had my younger sister.
Hmm.
So there's like
Ooh.
three different
Three different
generations.
families.
Yeah,
Right.
three different generations of siblings
Yeah.
taking place. So I
I
can
I have a
relate.
little bit of that. I have a half sister that's about 10 years older than I am, I think.
Okay.
And then I have a brother, full brother, that's 7 years older. I'm the baby of the family.
Mm, interesting. Interesting. So Dwight, with that experience of not only feeling as the odd man out, for lack of a better terminology, coming to me right now,
Yeah.
outside of the home,
Hmm.
but you are experiencing that within the home and
Yes.
having to try and speak up for yourself to say, hey, this doesn't feel good.
Hmm.
But you're expressing that they didn't even get that communication. They doubled down on it. And
Yeah.
I can imagine that kind of made you retreat even more within yourself.
Oh, definitely. One of the things that I did, I remember being in a place where I was completely alone and had to be good with that. So my parents showed me that they weren't safe in
Yeah.
a lot of ways. And so I would find myself just going outside and retreating to the woods that were beyond the development where the house was. And I would just spend a lot of time by myself, not really. I wasn't really bothered with having to. go and try to figure things out with trying to go and make new friends. I would just lose myself in my imagination, and I was perfectly happy there.
He always says that he has a rich inside world, and he does. You know, he's trained himself to be like fine by being by himself. He's very self-sufficient.
Yes. Yeah. I can sense that. I can
It's
sense
been a
that.
little challenging to get him to kind of rely on me a little bit or to, to let me help a little bit.
Sure. Sure.
And I have some of that myself, so for different reasons, but
Yeah.
Yeah.
yeah, it's a
Did
process.
absolutely. Absolutely. It's just a continuous reintegration, especially on the soul level for the two of you.
Yeah.
Um, there's a reintegration, and from what I've seen, just for in the short time that I've known you two, um, there's a real connectedness there, um, and I can appreciate that because
It
some,
runs deep, and we realized it almost immediately. It was
Yeah.
really quick. I mean, the day we met, we had been in each other's presence for less than 10 minutes and the sparks flew.
mm,
And as we spent a little bit of more time together, we realized that there was just something there was a very definite, unique energy
Hmm.
between us that we neither of us had experienced in previous relationships. And he
yeah,
was in a 20-year marriage
yeah,
before me.
yeah,
So, yeah, we believe we have something rare and unique.
yeah, and
And it's not perfect, we still have relationship issues and squabbles and
Yes.
things that we have to work through. I think that we have this mythology that we believe in that when you have that special energy or that really special love, that it's all going to be smooth sailing, there couldn't be anything farther from that couldn't be farther from the truth.
Hmm.
It I mean, I've come to believe that ideal relationships are the ones that poke the bear.
yeah,
You know, the ones that make us look at our deepest, darkest shit.
yeah,
And we definitely do that for each other.
Yes, we
Yeah,
do.
yeah.
We do.
for sure. That I mean, that's across the board with any relationship. It's always as much as it can be phenomenal and fantastic through most of it, there's those moments where you butt heads and you clash, and certain things are difficult for one versus the other, and it's like, okay, we gotta assess this to see what's what and how do we smooth this over, or is it okay for us to just leave it as it is and understand that there's going to be those differences that are going to come up that we just have to be aware of when they do come up, kind of a thing.
Mhm.
It's certainly learning to navigate the the territory.
Yeah,
It's very much about navigation and um, yeah, yeah.
Well, and I'll say that one of the things that we've done as we have um, honored the fact that we will from time to time bump against each other's triggers is we try to have the awareness whenever something comes up and it doesn't feel good, we speak very openly about it.
yeah,
Yes, and that's been part of the navigation because I don't think that came supernatural to either one of us. I think we both had to learn to just share real time, okay, what's coming up for me right now is, and sometimes it's not delivered quite that gently and softly, but, sometimes it's more like, God damn, you're pissing me off right now, you know. But I mean, think part of what I think works in that navigation is that we're not harboring it.
Mhm.
We're not stuffing it and getting resentful. There was some of that in the beginning, but I think we're doing less and less of that.
Right. Well, and I know you were just joking just then, but when you're telling me that I'm being the asshole, my response is always, well, thank you for pointing it out.
Yeah, instead of getting to now, in the beginning, you did get a little defensive, and normally I don't usually say you're being an asshole, but I will say, all right, what you're doing right now is like not okay. Just not okay. That tone you're using with me, or something like that. Uh, I'm learning to be a little more gentle with my delivery,
Mhm.
to try to low key it and share it without all the energy behind it. But there are those moments when it's like, yeah, that's not an option.
Oh, that's hilarious. But also, too, I'm saying within this scenario that Dwight is still kind of sticking up for himself in a way,
Oh
saying,
no, he
"Hey,
has no problem sticking up for himself. And I invite that. When we first got together, I said, look, here's the deal. I've been on the planet long enough to know that if this is going to work, we have to train each other how to treat us.
Right.
okay,
So I'm literally going to do things that train you how to treat me the way I want to be treated.
yeah,
And I said, and I invite you to do the same thing with me. And there are
sure,
times when he'll say that I'm doing something and I'm saying, okay, this is on you because you trained me to do this.
right,
You trained me to do this.
right,
And
right,
he's like, you're right. I did. So I mean, that was a process of mine that I even teach, as a coach, that's part of my thing.
yeah,
It's a big part of my thing that we do train people how to treat us.
Hmm.
And there's very, very specific ways that we do that. And it's not always an easy concept to grasp.
for sure, for sure. But I think it's a phenomenal approach for anybody going into a relationship if they were to have that potentially at the forefront of their mind of saying, hey, look, we already know that there's going to be stuff that comes up about ourselves that are going to rub each other potentially the wrong way at certain points in time. But yet we're going to try to develop within this dynamic that we have the way we want to be treated by the other.
Well, and
That's
it's
that's
it's
beautiful to me.
nuanced and there's
Yeah. Oh,
layers
yeah, yeah.
and there are times when I say, okay, look, if I'm not treating you the way you want to be treated, that's because you're not training me to do what you want me to do. We are trainable as human beings, and I'm not saying train somebody. There's been a standing joke forever that when a woman meets a man, she has to train him not to pee all over the toilet seat and all this stuff. And there's a joke about that. It's not that kind of training. It's not training him to do what you want him to do.
Exactly. Exactly.
It's training him how to treat you. And the way you do that is not the way one might think.
Correct.
You know,
Correct.
it's more about the way you're being.
Hmm.
It's the way I'm being that is teaching you and training you to treat me poorly.
Yeah.
It's all here. It's an inside job, in other
Yeah.
words.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly. Um, Dwight, I want to come back to you, to the time spent outdoors,
Hmm.
and getting off to yourself. At that point in time, were you creating internally your own world of being in that environment, or was there a creative element to that that
There,
helped you get through it?
there definitely was, and I would say that there was an intensity with the the world in my mind, the way that it presented, that in some ways would play out in ways that were a little disturbing. Like I remember, um, while I would retreat to the outdoors to have some kind of just a little pause from whatever was going on inside the home. The
Respite.
things, yes, definitely a respite. But when I was in the home, I could see that there was friction between my parents.
Okay.
And while I didn't interact with it directly most of the time, it had its effects on me.
Mm,
So I needed that time to be outdoors. But when I was still processing all that stuff, it exhibited itself in the form of intense night terrors.
Oh, wow.
And it was, I actually have a memory of having something that, and I wouldn't know how, if I would classify it as a hallucination or a shared dream. But
Okay.
I remember a time I had a cousin sleeping over, and there may have been a little bit of weather also, but I was um, I was seeing figures, I was seeing things that were quite frightening, and I remember he also saw something, and my mother admitted that she saw something,
Mm,
and it was just one of those things where I had an experience of it that was especially intense. And the thing is, they were just guests in something that I inhabited all the time.
got you. Got you. So what's coming to me with that is you had heightened perception of the world and different things that others potentially could not see. But within that moment, there was other people that saw that. So as the way I'm looking at it, it was almost as a validation point of your ability to see things that others cannot on a regular
Yeah.
basis. Which is interesting because, and I can sense that and I can understand it vividly because when I was a kid, I used to see spirits
Mhm.
and they would come at different times and I could always sense when they were coming. And it was a group of four. It was an adult male, adult female, and then there were two children, a girl and a boy. They would all come most of the time together. And I could always sense when they were coming because that male energy was always the dominant energy, and it was very frightening. The female and the two children were always soft, wanted to try and engage with me more, but it just never worked out that way. But I could always sense when they were coming.
Mhm.
I always felt that energy prior to it taking place.
I have a friend that has a small group of apparitions that visit him
Mm,
regularly, and he's even kind of given them nicknames. And
yeah,
they share messages and things with him. I've known him for, oh my gosh, this year makes 20 years, and so I'm real clear it's not any kind of weird mental illness or anything. He's as sane as you could possibly be, but he just has an insight that most of us don't have. And that can come in a lot of different ways.
Mhm.
Dwight and I are both empaths. I would say perhaps I'm a little bit more deeply empathic. I don't know for sure. I feel the feelings of other people. He
yeah,
doesn't talk about that much.
yeah.
But I literally feel the feelings of people around me and can tell them sometimes what they're feeling when they're not even aware what they're feeling.
Same here. Same here.
Um, we're also both highly sensitive people,
Yeah.
and that the respite that he referred to, he still
Mm,
does that.
okay.
In the last few months, his job, the day job, not our passion, the day job is been very, very stressful. And multiple times during the day, and we both office here at the house, multiple times a day, he just walks away from the computer and goes out and walks around the block and takes that little respite to take care of himself
Yes.
when
Yes.
the day is just like he's way more sensitive than I am in things that he's easily overstimulated. I can be overly stimulated sometimes, but it has pretty dramatic effects on him.
Mm.
Early in our relationship, we walked into a Macy's one day and somebody
Oh.
spritzed him with cologne.
Oh,
And I
wow.
thought he was going to like come unglued. Um,
That was a hard day.
um, he's very sensitive to loud noise and bright lights.
Yeah. Yeah.
I have some of that, but nothing to the degree that he does. I mean, he wears noise canceling earbuds a lot of the time because just the world is just too
Too loud.
noisy and overstimulates him.
Too loud. Yeah. I can relate to all of that. I feel um are the same uh with each other, even as far away as we are. Um and I think too that's the thing that brings us together, right? The likes end up finding each other at certain points in time. Um,
Yes. Yeah.
and that when that connection takes place, it, it's cool because it feels like you're finding people from your tribe.
Mm.
Well, and you're right, distance doesn't play a role in it because I'm extremely intuitive and empathic, and I can be a million miles away from somebody and feel their feelings and have intuitive hits about something that has to do with them
Yeah,
and with incredible accuracy.
yeah, yeah. With that, at that when you said you got into high school and even in junior high, you're getting bullied. You're getting bullied. And were you thinking about a creative career at that point in time? Um,
I've never really given this that much thought about like the
okay,
two and how they might play into each other. I think that yes, probably maybe in middle school or high school, I was really drawn to the idea of cutting hair. And I can remember in high school, I cut hair for some of my friends' little sisters,
Mm.
you
okay,
know, and I can remember cutting hair for my nieces, cutting their hair. And then when I got off to college, there were people in the dorm that would come to my dorm room for me to cut their hair. And then I got away from it for a period of time. Um, I went after college, I went into a family business, which was the automotive industry.
oh
And
wow,
everybody that knows me now goes, "Oh my God, I cannot fathom that." I cannot fathom that. But there was a day when I was maybe about 23 and I was making some noise about wanting to be a hair cutter.
okay,
And my dad just looked, he'd heard this many times. He just whirled around and he said, "Bullshit," really loud. And I mean, I was taken back and he goes, "I don't believe you." He said, "You've been squawking about this shit forever." He said, "Have you ever researched what schools are available here in our city? Have you ever found out what curriculums are available and how it might work around your work schedule? Have you found out what tuition costs or what the tools cost? Have you done any research? Have you done anything?" And I was like, "No." And I
oh
was
man,
like,
yeah,
well, I mean, probably within out in 72 hours, I had done all of that. I had researched the schools. I knew everything I needed to know, and I'm coming back to him with a report. And, once I took charge, he supported me completely.
mm,
I was working in the family business and I was actually running one of the family businesses.
okay,
And he gave me off one day a week to go to school. The best school I could find locally was about 35 miles away in another town. It's about a 30-minute drive.
specific
And
cosmetology.
it was it was
Okay,
it was actually barbering and
okay, gotcha.
I would drive to that little town every Saturday and do class all day long. Of course, it was going to take me half my life to finish the course at one day a week, but I didn't care. I was on my way.
Yeah,
And then that school closed, and the next closest school was at a town that was an hour away. And he gave me a second day off. He let me take Wednesdays and Saturdays off, and I would drive back and forth every Wednesday and Saturday to go to school. He was incredible in that way. I went to school and finished, and he financed my first salon.
mm,
he set me up in business
Wow.
and had that much belief and faith in me. He didn't really understand why I wanted to cut hair.
Sure.
He didn't get it,
Yeah. Yeah.
but he could tell I really wanted to do it. And then I showed him that I really,
Could do
by
it.
the time I got out of school, I was cutting everybody in my family's hair and they all thought I was really good. I was cutting all my friends. And so I've been, that's very creative,
Yeah.
very
Yeah.
creative. And then when I started to build a clientele, and he would come by every once in a while. And of course, most of my clients were women, and he would see all these beautiful women coming and going. Then one day he said, "Could I just come down and kind of hang out and sweep hair from underneath your chair?" And I'm like, "No, go away."
He wanted some eye candy.
He wanted some eye candy. Yeah. Gotta love dad.
That's hilarious. What college did you go to and what did you attend for at that? Because you completely switched out after that, went
I
into
did. After high school, I went to Texas. What's it called now? It was called Southwest Texas State
Oh,
University then.
yeah. Now it's just Texas State, I believe.
Texas State, I think. It's in
all right.
San Marcos, Texas. And I went for 2 semesters, and during spring break, I realized that it wasn't where I needed to be.
Okay.
It wasn't my calling. I went to my parents during spring break and I said, I love living in San Marcos. I'm having an absolute blast. I've made a whole circle of friends. I'm partying like a rock star. My grades suck and I'm not really into school. And I'm spending your retirement and I'm not feeling very good about that.
Mm,
Okay. Okay.
And they said, we will honor whatever you choose.
mm,
We want you to
Nice.
do what you want to do. We want you to be happy. If school's not it, then let's change things. And I don't know very many people at that time, and even still, with parents that are
Right.
like that.
Yeah, for
Most
sure.
that wasn't my
want
experience.
want you to go to college and get your 4-year degree, and they want it in this profession because that makes them feel good about themselves. Whatever.
Hmm.
Yeah.
Um, and I dabbled in a couple of part-time jobs after I left school for about 6 months, and then I went to my dad and said, "I think I want to be in the family business." I said, "I think I'd like to run one of the family businesses." And he said, I was only 19. And he said, "So show me,
Okay.
show
Okay.
me."
Cool.
And so I went to work back in the family business and I did everything I could to show him. In probably about 3 or 4 months, he put me in charge,
Wow. Nice.
put me in the lead position. I had a staff of about 7 or 8 employees underneath me.
Hmm. Very cool.
And there were most of them older than me. I was one of the youngest ones on staff, I say. And yeah, it was kind of peculiar, but I stepped up, you
Yeah.
know. So I started learning leadership skills at a very early age.
Yes.
And at the time wouldn't have even thought to name them that. Wouldn't have even thought to say, "Oh, this is about leadership." I was just the boss, I was running things and
Yeah.
probably not. I don't know. I didn't suck at it. The business did flourish more than it was with the manager that they had running it when I came in.
Right.
So
Right.
I was doing something right. I'm a people person.
Yeah,
I'm a people person. I can just charm the customers and
for sure.
I mean, not in a manipulative way, that I just, you know, in a service to others kind of way.
Exactly. Exactly.
Yeah, oh my God, the customers loved me
Mm.
at the automotive thing and then at the salon. Oh, I had clients that stayed with me through my entire career.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I mean, that says a lot about the person that you are ultimately. Was it dealerships that you were family business?
It was an Exxon full service gas station.
Oh, right on. Okay. Okay.
Yes. Now we had other businesses, other automotive businesses, but that was the one I took over. I had grown up there. He opened it when I was 11 and I started helping out when I was 13.
Yeah.
And, it's interesting because there was here I am a coach now, and I was for years a hairdresser where my clients would come in and just tell their whole life to me. And I can remember being about 13 when I started helping out at the gas station. We had a little apartment complex across the street where there were a lot of elderly and widowed women, and they were lonely, and they, would come in as customers, and I would wait on them, and they would share their life story with me. They would tell me everything that was going on. And my dad would say, "Son, you cannot spend that much time with every customer." And I would say, "But Daddy, I can't not. They need me, you
Right,
know?"
right. Yeah,
And I knew at an early age that I was here to do something. I wasn't real clear what it was, but it was definitely with people, and it was definitely listening and letting them share themselves with me.
yeah.
And that's played out through everything I've done through my whole life. Over and up.
So, one of the things that I'm seeing with your storyline, Maddox, is that early on, your father was displaying to you by making the toys that you could be creative and inventive. And he was showing you to look outside of the traditional options for toys and things to entertain yourself and use just what's around you to be able to have some fun,
Hmm.
have something that would bring you some joy.
I've never really given it a lot of thought, but he was a master at improvisation, not necessarily the way we think of improv, like in comedy, but he would improvise in so many ways in anything that was work related or mechanical or some kind of task that needed to be done. Um, yeah,
Yeah,
I never really spent a lot of time thinking about that. But yes, he could make something out of nothing.
Hmm.
yeah. And then too, even with you going off to college, realizing, okay, this isn't for me. It's not the thing that I want to do. And then you deciding to go into um, the family business, he's saying to you, all right, you want to do this? Show me you can do it. I've been the example. Now you show me if you've learned.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's amazing. That's amazing. I love that.
You
Um,
know, as I said, he could be pretty critical sometimes. He could be pretty hard on me, but he did a lot of things right.
yeah,
He took me down to the bank when I was 14 years old and opened up a checking account with my name on it.
nice.
I had my own checks and my own money. I was working part-time there at the gas station. I was doing a little bit of customer work, but I also had responsibilities. I mowed the grass and trimmed all the hedges around the station. I kept the bathrooms clean, and I stocked the vending machines and things like that. And
Yeah,
so I had a Social Security card at an early age and was making money. And I think this was maybe before we had child labor laws,
for sure.
because
For sure.
I was working at a pretty early age, and um, you know, I would I would work not in the afternoons after school, but I would sometimes work on weekends, and I would work at holidays, and in the summers I would work even when I was off at school. When I came home for the holidays, you'd be off for like 3 weeks from college. I would work at the
Yeah,
station. He would let me work. I knew we were a neighborhood station, not a freeway station. And I knew every customer that came across that driveway by name, and I knew where they lived
yeah,
because I had driven them home.
right,
Hmm.
right. Yeah. I think it's very interesting because I think a lot of times for creatives, um, our parents don't always understand us. And sometimes they they show us love in a different way. And I'm seeing that with the way that your father was interacting with you.
When I was 15, he took me down to the bank and co-signed a loan for me so I could buy a brand new motorcycle.
Oh wow.
When I turned 16, I wanted a car. So we sold the motorcycle. He went down to the bank again and co-signed another loan for me to buy my first car.
Wow.
When I started doing hair, I'm 6'4". I'm really, really tall.
Okay.
And all of the things, shampoo bowls, hair cutting chairs, all of that stuff is designed for people that are not this tall.
Yes.
And shortly after getting into the industry, I started having back problems.
Mm,
And a chiropractor said, "You are bending over way too much. You're putting your body in really stressful bending positions to do your job. You need to have your work higher."
yeah.
And we're like, "What's that going to look like? None of the chairs, this is as high as any of them goes up." And
Right.
my dad, once again, just innovation and improvisation. He went to the local store and bought several pieces of 1 inch thick plywood, set my styling chair on top of the plywood, traced it with a pencil, cut out 6 circles. So it was 6 inches of plywood, nailed and glued them together, stained the sides of them to match all the cabinetry in my salon. And then we put my chair on top of that pedestal. And that pedestal went from salon to salon with me for 40 years because he
Mm,
made it my first year business. 40 years that traveled with me. And literally, I don't know, thousands of clients sat on top of that pedestal over a 40-year period of time.
yeah. Yeah.
You know, the day I closed my salon and started clearing the space out and selling and letting go of, and I didn't keep hardly anything. I kept a little tin of some of my tools. I got to that big wooden disc that had sat under my chair for 40 years.
Yeah.
There was absolutely no use for that, and I had the hardest time letting go of that.
Yeah. I know you
I
did.
knew I couldn't store it and move it around. It didn't make any sense to do that,
Yeah,
but I had a hard time letting go of that
for sure.
because it was this incredible gift. I mean, it wasn't some fancy thing that my dad gave me. It was something that out of love, he innovated and made with his own hands
Yeah.
to help me address a problem I was having.
Yeah. Just like him giving you those stilts that nobody else had access to.
Yeah.
Yeah. It was a standing joke at the salon. People would come in and then they would look at that and they would go, "What is that?" I said, "Oh, honey, I just believe in putting all my clients up on a pedestal."
Nice. Genius marketing.
And they loved
Genius
it.
marketing. Yes.
They absolutely loved it. I just put all my clients up on a pedestal.
Genius. Very genius. Dwight, let's pivot back over to you as you're coming towards the end of high school. And you're even having a hard time as well through junior high and high school with the bullying and that type of stuff. What is your thoughts about the future as you're exiting high school and what you're going to move into next?
Oh my goodness. I definitely had to shift my plans. And I would say, while I did have some encounters with bullying, I was in a strangely unique position in that there were a lot of people who took it upon themselves to protect me. And that was so affirming.
Yeah.
He's little. He's little. He's only 5'8".
Yeah.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So
Okay.
I do. Not that he needs protecting. My God, he's strong as a gorilla. But um,
So he can
no.
easily fit up under your arm.
Oh yeah,
Oh, yeah.
yeah, yeah. He's little.
Yeah, I remember when I would have those chance encounters with kids that wanted to show that they were tough. Um, I I would not play along, and thankfully there were enough kids in my cohort that would look out for me and set people straight when they were going to try to intimidate me or try to bully me in any way.
Yeah.
God, I wish I'd had that. I did not.
Angels for you.
Yeah.
Angels in human form.
Hmm.
Absolutely.
Now, at home, it was a bit of a different story, and I think looking back, it's kind of the way that you were just talking about how love is shown. Um, I remember I started working at an early age too, but my choices were a little different. They were defined by what was available. I remember one of my first one of my first real jobs was working for what was the International Wildlife Park.
Nature.
And yes, yeah.
That's his respite.
Yeah,
And
I'm
it
seeing that.
it was a really strange setup because the way that they sold it was people could come right in the middle of suburbia or right in the middle of Dallas Fort Worth. They could go and see all of the animals that they'd see on an African safari. And I remember one of my first jobs was making sure that we kept the rhinos in their designated area because they don't see very well, and they're a little bit hard to wrangle once they go too far.
Yeah, say the least.
Yeah. But it was a lot of fun, and I enjoyed the engagement with the people and with the animals, and it was a really nice experience. And from there, they had to pull up stakes on the wildlife park, and I believe they took all the animals to a place pretty far south of Dallas. And I got a job at the local theme park. I worked at Six Flags throughout. I guess it started in middle school and high school, and um, that was my chance to mix with a lot of kids from all over, spanning in ages from my own age to kids that were trying to figure out what they were going to do after college. And it was it was interesting just seeing the mix of people that would come and go and really being a part of it. Another thing that was a point of friction, I was motivated to work early because I had things that I wanted. My parents, we were not of means,
Mhm.
so the bargain that my parents struck with me was I could do anything I wanted as long as I paid for it.
Okay.
And one of the things that I pursued because I had someone that had a little bit of faith in me. I played musical instruments. I was in the band in school, and I think I had this same way of it that a lot of people do, where when I started, I remember it was not very pleasant. It was very hard, and it just seemed like it was a real struggle. But then I got to a point where I was really good at it,
Mm,
and it was the kind of thing where I would go to the competitions. I'd play in the all city band and all regional, and even went to play in the all state band, and I really liked it, but that required playing instruments that I had to pay for, and it required paying for private lessons, and it required a whole lot in the way of money and resources and time and energy. And I remember a particular incident with my father that was it's kind of painful to recall, and I doubt he really remembers it, but I remember coming home late from the theme park one night, and my father had waited up, but he'd also uh, been drinking very heavily, and he was angry because I was in so late, and I don't know if he just assumed that I was out engaged in some foolishness, but I remember my greeting was being lifted up by my neck and having my head touch the ceiling.
Oh wow.
And yeah, it was pretty intense. He left some marks, and it wasn't too long after that that I wound up leaving home. I was 17, I believe,
A junior in high school?
a junior in high school. So there was definitely a plan that I had for how things were going to go, and things were lined up really nicely, and all of that had to change because I had to figure out how it was that I could actually have my own place to stay. I rented an apartment, um, jumping through all of the loopholes that would allow me to engage in a contract before I was of legal age.
Right.
And, thankfully I had people that were sympathetic to my situation. I guardian angels again, people
Yeah.
that looked
Yeah.
out for me. And my life was really hard. All of the things that I had enjoyed with the music, I had to give up for a while. I still pursued it to the degree that I could, but I was always working when I wasn't in school, and it was to the point that I remember my senior year of high school, I made a deal with the assistant principal that he would look the other way because I had real issues with attendance. It was just really hard for me to wake up in time and get there. But he knew my situation and he knew I was trying. And he said that he would do what he could to bend things in my favor as long as he knew that I was trying. And so we made it through that. And
Well, your grades demonstrated that you were trying. Didn't you have excellent grades?
yeah,
In spite of all that, he had excellent grades. So I think,
Okay.
it was easy for the guy to see that he was making the effort.
yeah.
Sure. Sure.
Well, I remembered still wanting to stay on that track and do the things that I wanted, but it was really hard coming from a place where I didn't have the resources that a lot of people would take for granted.
Sure.
And I was in the middle of what was a pretty busy area. I mean, I was in Arlington, Texas, which is another one of those places in the mid cities between Dallas and Fort Worth, and kind of the busiest part of it. And my senior year, I went to the high school. It's in the middle of downtown Arlington, and just blocks away, there was the university, the UT at Arlington. I went there for a year, and I was pursuing a program that was it was a music program. So again, I was facing all of the expenses that come with doing those things. I had labs that were, effectively 0 hour classes that were just as expensive as any 4 hour class, and they were required. And um, I was in that situation where I was constantly working or engaged in studies, and I was at a real breaking point because I was trying things that I'd never done before. And I remember joking recently with someone that functional piano basically was my breaking point away from music because it was just killing me. I did not have left hand independence because I played wind instruments my entire life.
Okay.
And I was just on the edge of being able to grasp the concept, but it was just too far. I was too depleted to have the resources to be able to ramp up, to be able to acquire that skill.
Yeah.
And so it was with a heavy heart that I walked away from that. And I remember for several years after that first year of school, uh, I would take classes as I could, but I was very much in a place of struggle, just trying to figure out how it was that I was going to make it day to day. And I had a lot of really odd jobs. I remember working in a record store in Arlington. I actually had a little bit of notoriety because I was a walking billboard when that was kind of rare.
Mm,
And it was it was something I had a lot of fun with, but it was not without its weird challenges.
yeah.
Uh, Unfortunately, in a place that is kind of known for its heavy traffic, seeing a guy walking around wearing costumes becomes a really popular target for people that want to throw things out their car windows.
Yeah. Yeah. I can imagine. I can imagine.
But, all of that led me to a place where I was grinding as hard as I could to try to make it on my own. And I came to a point where um, I wound up um, going back to my parents for help. And what I had decided was I needed to find a way to have some kind of um, a launch pad to be able to have my life go in a direction. And what I chose was to enlist in the Army.
Okay.
And by that time, I was 23 years old. So I was older than most recruits.
Yeah.
At the time I went in, it was when Don't Ask, Don't Tell was fresh.
Yeah.
And I remember the some of the forms that I was filling out at the recruiting station had the language just lined through with all of the things they couldn't question you about.
Right.
And I remember there having some experiences when I was just going through the just some of the things that are part of the basic training experience. There was a long timer, a first sergeant, someone that was very senior, had, eyeing his retirement,
Yeah.
that was a part of the old guard. And I remember he had a lot of us recruits in a circle around a fire and was telling a lot of jokes that violated the policy. And
Mhm.
uh, he dared anyone to say anything about it because it was just it was just the way that he was wired. He was a bully and he was on his way out. But I would say outside of that particular experience, well, in the beginning, the I found the army to be a place that was ahead of the curve for a lot of things.
Okay.
I met people who were from other countries, from other cultures, all from other territories that are oriented in other cultures and
Yeah.
basic training. And everyone there grew very close and we took care of each other. It's very much a part of that whole experience. And I would say throughout, anyone that wore a uniform, we definitely had a bond and a shared experience. And, I had a long school for my advanced individual training. So I got to spend another year, a year with a whole bunch of people that were going through the electronics and radio repair stuff that I was doing. And I got to know those people really well. We bonded and had a lot of experiences that were unique to the place where we were. AIT was in Georgia, in a place that's also known for hosting the Masters.
Yeah.
And uh, I remember Augusta was a really small rural place, and it would transform every spring whenever the Masters was in town. They'd shut everything down to accommodate the influx of people that made it nearly impossible to get around to do anything.
Yeah.
And it was a weird springboard to what was my only permanent duty station. I worked at a Cold War site by day, and at night I worked for I volunteered at a local charity, manning a suicide crisis hotline.
Oh, wow. Okay. Very interesting. Very interesting. I want to point out something
Yeah.
that's very it's gold within an individual. And I want to make sure that the audience is catching this as well. But it's the resiliency
Mhm.
that is within you that is so, from my perspective, it's so profound. It has carried you out of places that have been so hard and so hurtful, and it's just literally moved you into the different spaces that have allowed you to get some of that respite that nature had given you throughout
Mhm.
your lifetime. Um, and the fact that again too, you've got this creative element that you've had to put on hold and stop pursuing um, in order to survive, literally. Um, but that resiliency that's within you, um, I hope listeners will hear that and see that within your conversation of your life story here. That those are things that are within us, that if we can tap into that, it, we can go farther than we think we can many times. And I wanted to just point that out within your story. Um, Also to the fact that you shifted into working a suicide hotline, that shows another element of who you are, um, and what kind of heart you have to be able to speak to someone on the other end of that phone line who potentially was at the end of their rope. And you could understand that from your experiences, but your resiliency carried you through. And at that point, with choosing to do that, you're being willing, maybe unconscious of it at the time, but you're being willing to share your resiliency with someone who's at the end of their rope and care for them. Say, hey, I understand where you're at. I can speak to some of what you're feeling and experiencing, and I want you to know that there's hope, and there's hope here on the other end of this line for you. And I want to take that and transition that into what you guys are currently doing, and this is just because of uh, a time constraint scenario that we're working with, because I know we could go many more hours further here, but wanting to be respectful of your time. I want to shift into what you guys are working on with your For the Love of Creatives podcast, with the coaching that you're doing for creatives and individuals who are looking to move forward um, with a place of strength and embedding that into their psyche as well as their spirit. Um, Either one of you can take point on this, but could you just speak about that a little bit about what that mission is and why you're doing it?
Go ahead.
Sure. Um, there's definitely a need. I can't help but go back to how it was that this all started. Uh, After the pandemic, I know that I'd had to deal with the painful loss of a partner that I'd been with for over 20 years. Um, it was really hard to deal with just mourning that loss and figuring out how I was going to be in the world. And I had the good fortune of getting the direction of someone who'd written a book about getting people to build big relationships through small gatherings.
Mm.
And I followed that recipe. That was something that gave me a focus outside myself. And I did that a couple of times before the author who wrote that book got me in contact with Maddox. And I went to one of his events, and we then hosted 20 subsequent events together after that.
Oh, wow.
Your original question was about our purpose, and we didn't just say one day, "Oh, I think we should, start a podcast and create a community for creatives."
Yeah.
It wasn't that at all. It was well, I say slow. Time is relative, but it was this
It was an evolution.
evolution. And I mean, initially, we didn't know each other. We'd never met.
Right.
Yeah.
We had both read the same book. He had had a loss of a partner. I had been locked in my house for 2 years by myself from the pandemic. And we both had this desire to bring new friends into our lives and to build a nice little healthy, rewarding social life. And then the author introduced us, not in any way to fix us up. He just thought we had some things in common and introduced us. And we sparks flew when we first met, and he came to one of my gatherings, and then we've hosted like he said, all of them together since then. But it it started off as just little gatherings here at the house.
Mhm.
And then we began to branch out a little bit. And then at one point, I don't remember how we came up with the idea of wouldn't it be fun to have a theme party and maybe multiple themes. We started
Right.
off with let's pull a group of creatives together.
Yeah.
Well, we never got to the other themes. It was kind of like, well, we discovered that there's an entire population of people out there that we really resonate with,
Mhm.
people that are really creative in so many ways. I think we pigeonhole creativity sometimes thinking that it's about painting or sculpting or making something. And the truth is, creativity comes in everything we do. Our podcast is terribly creative. We're always, when we host these events, we're always creating new things to bring into the events for the participants.
Yeah.
And there's an energy that comes along with collections. I won't say this is true of every creative person. So I'm going to say it's more the collective.
Yeah.
The collective, there's an energy that we both really, really love that energy and resonate with that energy.
Mhm.
So we tell people, we didn't have any intention of starting something for creatives. We knew we were building community. We thought it was for personal reasons, but the creative deal kind of picked us.
Yeah.
Well, and in a lot of ways, I would say that we have, through our events and through the podcast, opened people up to a way of being that is, while it should come naturally, there are a lot of prevailing forces that make it so that people are less open. They're very task driven. Everyone is rushed and busy and distracted.
Yeah.
And we provide a space for people to slow down, to engage their curiosity again, and to just show up fully as themselves and leave the judgment outside.
And through this 2 years, we've realized that truthfully, I mean, there's exceptions, but truthfully, the masses have no clue how to be in community.
Yeah.
Right. Yes.
Like really be in community. There's a lot of shit out there that we refer to as community, and from our definition, it is not community.
Yeah.
We define community in a very specific way, and it is very much about connection. People refer to us as LGBTQ people, that community. Well, you're talking about millions and billions of, well, not billions, but millions of people that I don't know, you know,
Right.
you know,
Right.
just because we have some, sexual preferences that are the same doesn't make us a community. It makes us a group. I think the word community is misused, but to me, if it's real community, you know the people in the community. You may not know every single one of them, depending on how big
Oh,
the community is, but you know the immediate people in your community.
Yeah.
And there's an energy where you are taking care of each other. You've got each other's backs.
Right.
There's this acceptance and there's this belief and support. And that is a true community. And for the most part, the masses no longer have that skill.
Right.
We've had things that have come into our world in the last few years that have basically eradicated that skill in the masses.
yeah.
Yeah.
And
Well,
we want to bring that back. We want to teach people how to reap the rewards of being in community, real community.
right.
Yes. Yes. And I think the pandemic was a pivotal moment in time that broke that structure down.
It was the straw that broke the camel's back. We were
Yeah.
already in trouble, and then the pandemic happened, and oh my God.
And
Yeah.
all of those dark forces were accelerated because people were forced to isolate. They were
Yep.
forced to be in their homes, and every interaction that they had was most likely through a screen. It was something that was over distance.
All of our lives, we've heard it takes 21 consecutive days to build a habit. Now, I know that there's some technology now that says that may or may not be actually true, but we had a habit of being by ourselves in our house for 2 years. And
Exactly.
so now it's a habit that we live on. It lives on, and every one of us pandemic's been over for, I don't know,
Two
almost
years at least.
3 years
3 years.
now,
Yeah.
Mhm.
and we are still kind of holed up in our house by ourselves, a lot of us.
Yes.
It's
Absolutely.
hard to get people to actually show up for an in real life event.
Yes. And I applaud you for doing what you're doing to try and recreate, reestablish that within society, because that's where true connection takes place.
It's so rich. It is
Yeah.
just so rich when you,
Mhm.
I mean, what we do in bringing people together in these events, we have never had one single person go, "Oh, I've seen something like this before. I've done this. This is nothing new."
Yeah.
Not one single person. People afterwards go, "I've never experienced anything like this. This was phenomenal." Now, there's a few people that it makes uncomfortable, and that's okay.
Sure.
That's okay.
Yeah.
But it's very, 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 very few, very few. And we realize that those aren't our people. So
Right.
it's okay.
Right.
They're not our people.
Exactly.
We're focused on the ones that are going, "Yes, yes, give me more."
Exactly. Yeah, and you get to find those things out pretty quickly, I find. Um, and it's just, again, for lack of better terminology, it just weeds out those who are not supposed to be within your community, your presence, experiencing the energy of your soul, the love of your soul that you have for community. Those are just not supposed to be there. Those people are not.
We have very carefully curated our marketing, and we're still working on it, but we've curated our marketing where it causes our people to self-select.
Yes. Yes.
They know before they even come. They know when they read what we're doing pretty quickly. Probably the number one thing that self-selects is we cater to heart-centered creatives.
Yeah.
And the second you read that, whether you are or you ain't Blanche, you know,
Exactly.
and the people that aren't, the people that aren't heart-centered, being around heart-centered people makes them really uneasy. So they're not going to come to our event.
Yeah.
For sure. For sure. And again, it's an you know, talking about the empath that you are. Em Empathy towards others sometimes makes others feel uncomfortable,
Mm.
and they don't know how to accept that.
Yeah, when I can read into somebody and tell them what they're feeling, even though they're not sure what they're feeling, yes, that can make people very uncomfortable.
Exactly, exactly. And what I would hope the audience could get from this is that if you stop for just a moment and be willing to, within yourself, allow some of that empathy for another to take place, you might experience something that changes your life.
Mm.
And I
Absolutely.
feel that's the type of environment that you two are creating. And I applaud you for it.
Part of what we talk about, but we don't actually put in our marketing, and it we didn't set out to do this either. This has evolved, but there was a point where we realized that we we've given it a name. We don't use the name, like I said, in our marketing,
Mhm.
but we say that, if anybody says, "What do you do?" Part of what we may say is we host social healing circles.
Yeah.
Mm.
And we very intentionally bring rooms of people together that could not be more different.
Hmm.
Yes.
All ages, all body types, all
Yeah.
genders, all
Yeah.
relationships, some single, some coupled. We'll have gay, straight, trans. We'll have every skin color you can imagine in the room. There's often, some disabled people.
Hmm.
Or there's a new word for that. What is it?
Well,
It's the most new word, the newest word.
well, differently.
Differently abled. Yes,
Yeah.
there we go. Thank you. I'm trying to
Differently
keep
able.
up, people. I'm trying to keep up, but it's moving fast.
It's
And
moving way too fast.
the old dog here is having a hard time learning the new tricks. But, um, different religious backgrounds, different
Yeah.
political affiliations, and part of what we realize we do is we help people to get past the differences and to see the similarities. And when that happens, there's something deeply magical that shifts inside of people. And
Yes.
we believe that if we could do this broad scale, it would heal humanity. Notice I didn't say heal the planet, heal humanity.
Correct.
Now, maybe once we heal humanity, then humanity could heal the planet. But yeah, I mean, I talk a good game. We're doing it on a very small scale right here in Dallas, Texas. But the concept is there that if the others were to take the concept and put it into play, we could heal humanity.
Absolutely. And I think the way that you're connecting it to the earth, I think if humanity starts healing in the right direction, I think the earth is just going to sync up naturally with that because the earth takes care of itself to an extent. It's not going to allow something to overtake it because you have the natural occurrences that take place and they, course correct things in certain areas and certain points in time.
I think Mother Nature is reflecting back to us who we are
Yes.
as a species. You
Yes.
know, all of the volatile climate and everything that's going on, it is a reflection of what is going on inside of us collectively.
Hmm.
Yes. Most
So
definitely.
yes, the planet, everything's in life is a mirror.
Yep.
Everything's a mirror.
Yeah.
Yep.
You want to
It,
know what's going on inside of you, just look around you.
exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. And I want to give you some flowers as well, Maddox, because I gave Dwight some with some characteristics with him. But what I want to point out, and I'm sure you've probably seen it, but I want to know that you to know and the audience to know that it is recognized, is the fact that the work you are currently doing, you've literally been doing since you were 17. and that is being a ear to customers, to individuals that are coming to where you're at, and you're remembering their names. You're making sure that their service is phenomenal, not only within the gas station, but also within your salon over the years. You've been a therapist, you've been a listener, you've been a word of advice, you've been a word of encouragement, and you're continuing to do that on. And I think that that characteristic within you, the human, is profound and it's gold, as is the resiliency in Dwight is gold. Those two elements and the fact that you're together working them both simultaneously is phenomenal. But that ability with many other talents that you have, because I know in the podcast that I was on with you guys, you didn't feel you were an artist, but then I was seeing behind Dwight this piece of art that was on the wall in your house. And I was like, what? Hold up. You're an artist. At full stop, you're an artist. So
When I was
absorb that.
painting, I told people I was an artist, but when I stopped painting, I thought, well, you can't be an artist if you're not painting. It was not about not being able to own being an artist. It was just telling the truth. I mean, if I started painting again, I would say, yes, I'm an artist. But I haven't put a brush on canvas for probably 5 years.
But you have been an artist over 40 years of crafting people's
Mhm.
hair and the
And
way that
faces.
they look. You're
Makeup, I did makeup artistry.
okay.
I did
Again,
photography.
reiterating exactly what I'm saying.
Thank you so much, Rich, for recognizing that and saying what you said, honoring me.
Mhm.
I just have gone through life doing what comes natural to me, and it's only been in the last couple of years that I actually have an understanding and a language for it. I've just come to know in the last couple of years that every human being has an innate need to be seen and to be heard.
Absolutely.
And what I do is I create space for people to be seen and be heard. And I've been doing it all my life, but I didn't know that's what I was doing. Now that I know what I'm doing, I can do it more intentionally. And I find that it draws people to me in a magical way because I'm giving them one of life's biggest gifts.
Yes,
What bigger gift could you receive than an opportunity to be truly seen and truly heard? And
absolutely.
once again, if we all had an understanding of that simple concept, I hope everybody's really listening right now because the simple concept is if you want to change your world around you, start really being present with people and allowing them to be seen and heard because you give them that gift and now they just want to come and sit by you. And then there's somebody else that wants to. And before long, you've got a whole crowd of people that want to sit right by you because they just feel elevated every time they're in your presence.
Right.
You can elevate people by just giving them the space to be seen and heard. What a gift.
Exactly. They feel like that platform that your father created you to put under your chair to elevate every client that came into your salon. That's that's beauty. Those are the connected lines that we don't always see or pay attention to throughout our lives, but yet they hold tremendous meaning at particular points that hopefully the older that we get, we're able to look back and recognize those things. And I
Every
hope,
human being came into the world with gifts.
yes,
And when we can see those gifts and reflect those gifts back to them, then we've given them a gift and that lifts them up. And when we lift, Dwight and I say all the time, a rising tide
That's
lifts
all
all
those.
boats.
yeah,
We don't really believe in competition. competition is great in sports. It's great in things that are about fun,
Hmm.
but in business and other areas of life, competition's destructive. We believe in collaboration, and you lift up even the person that's serving the same audience you're serving. You lift
Yeah,
them up
yeah,
because there's enough for all of us.
right.
And, no two people are alike. We're like fingerprints. The
Yeah.
way we serve is different than the way somebody else serves. And people will be drawn to one or the other
Yeah,
naturally.
absolutely. And I think that if we could get to a place in life as individuals where we could understand that a little bit better, things might move a little bit faster in that healing of humanity.
I think so too. So
Mm.
I'm always very vocal about it. Stop competing and start collaborating.
Yeah.
If you're not in community, you're surviving. If you're in community, you're thriving.
Right.
Right. Absolutely. Absolutely. It's it's just amazing for me with this new venture that I'm doing with the artist recovery. And a lot of times the word recovery is only recognized for one segment of society, and that's those who are affected by substance abuse and those different types of things. But I look at the recovery as a word of being able to bounce back. The amount of time that it takes you to recover from a setback or an instance where it makes you feel lesser than, the time that that takes is the recovery component. And I say that for the simple fact of I want creatives, artists, creatives across the board, whether it's hair, whether it's nails, whether it's makeup, music, pencil, paper, brush, canvas, computer, all of it. All creativity is life force generating. And to be able to get others to understand that they can bounce back from whatever circumstances they're in, potentially through a creative field, the amount of light that will be created from that will shine on others and draw them in, which is the thing that you two are doing. You're shining a light and you're creating a light through what you're doing that is drawing people in and drawing them in a way that is accepting, inviting, and also comforting. And that's beautiful to me. And I appreciate that. I appreciate the two of you. And I hope that we're be able to do more of these because I feel again that there's we could spend hours conversing back and forth about these different things. And for me personally, I just want to know some more about your life stories. So I hope we can do this again as well. But I want to leave some lasting words to the audience that I try to invoke and get them to pay attention to. And that is to listen to your heart and always be kind to your mind.
Amen.
Oh, that's beautiful.